when we went to Hawaii in the early 60s, the Royal Air Force had a contingent over at Hickam Air Force Base, a U.S. Air Force Base. They were the support group for the people in Christmas Island down near Australia for their missile site. They had Brits, they had Scotsmen, they had Welshmen, Irishmen. One guy in particular, little Reggie Sullivan. Reggie was just barely large enough to be eligible to join the RAF. He just barely 5 feet tall. Thin little guy. And to say that the Brits have no sense of humor, I don't believe it. Reggie was a Welshman. He was the senior enlisted man in this group. So we would a lot of times go over to their place. I'd love to go over there and drink their British beer, and they would come over to our place and drink U.S. beer. Reggie thought there's no beer in the world quite as great as Schlitz. I would much rather drink their British beer. So the Air Marshal came through on an inspection tour. The Air Marshal is our equivalent of the U.S. Air Force Chief of Staff. He is the lead man in all of the Royal Air Force. Now, Reggie didn't tell me this story himself. One of his men told me later. So the Air Marshal is talking to Reggie about the welfare of his men, and morale, and this sort of thing. So he asked Reggie how his troops were faring, and Reggie assured him that they were doing well. And among other questions, the Air Marshal said, my troops go to church, do the Sergeant? And he said, oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Air Marshal said, and you, Sergeant Sullivan? Reggie told me, he said, well, he said, I'm a Church of England man myself. He said, you know, they don't have a Church of England here in Hawaii, so he said, I don't have a church to go to. But the Air Marshal said, and you, Sergeant Sullivan, you go to church? And he said, oh, yes, sir. He said, what church, Sergeant Sullivan? And Reggie, without hesitation, said, St. Joseph Schlitz Cathedral. When I heard this, I said, Reggie, you tell me you didn't. And he said, yeah, he said, I did. He said, I did. He said, I didn't even take time to think. He said, it just sort of slipped out. I said, well, I'm sure that the Air Marshal didn't know what you were saying. And he said, no, he didn't. And I said, Reggie, if he had known what you were saying, what would have happened to you? Reggie said, it's very simple. I'd have been drummed out of the Corps.
We got to know.